You too.
Looking forward to it.
I believe that if we get here on time, we need to start on time, and we need to be respectful of that, especially having our guest speaker that traveled an hour and a half to get here today. I just like to,
Yeah, two.
2.5. I lost an hour.
Yeah, that's okay.
Just to introduce a few people that are in the room, if I could have my Commission on Aging stand up. All the members of the Commission on Aging, if you could just stand up and say your name, please.
Skip on it. Bill Friesen.
Nancy Greiser, Francis Black, Patty Ditmore.
So you can have a seat. These are the individuals that serve on our Commission on Aging that meet monthly to talk about different programs or opportunities, things that we can do for older adults in our community. I hope you all know that if you'd like to join either the Friendship Center in Westland or the Dyer Senior Center in Westland, that we will pay your $12 membership fee for you and your significant other that lives in your household one time a year. So that's something, lots of programs. We always have flyers in the hallway. I'd also like to introduce a couple other people that are with us. Lieutenant Amore, Police Department, our Mayor John Racy, our Fire Chief Michael Strathner. A couple of city employees are with us. Mrs. Gruich, you see her friendly face when you scowl at her to pay your taxes. Cynthia is in our accounting department as well. Elise Leslie is our personnel director, and Councilman Alfred Brock is with us today. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you today Scott Teeter. Scott is the chief of the Financial Crimes Division. It also includes Child Support Unit. I need to talk to you. The Elder Financial Crimes Unit. As a prosecutor, he created the 2nd Elder Abuse Task Force for Michigan. He's a member of the force which was formed by our Attorney General, Dana Nessel. I could go on and on and on about him, but I think it would be best to let him speak to all of you and give you the details that he wants. Just a quick housekeeping item before he starts today. At the end of the hallway through the glass door is the restroom. We're going to go about an hour. I'm going to run out and we're going to go pick up some pizzas and breadsticks for all of you. So we're going to have a nice lunch. You will bring the food back in here and eat. So I really hope you get a lot out of today. And Scott, thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Well, good morning. Thank you for having me. I like short introductions. Otherwise, you have that weird feeling that you're listening to your own eulogy. Somebody it's like, yeah, that's some of the things they'll say. Anyway, I'm really encouraged by who we have here. Elder financial exploitation is the most prevalent crime in our society right now. It's the most unreported, it's the most undetected, it's the most uninvestigated, and unfortunately the most unprosecuted. And unfortunately, the bad guys figured that out. If you walk into a Speedway station with a pistol and you get $100, the entire criminal justice system knows exactly what to do to you and what will happen. But if you move in with your grandma and you siphon off $50,000, we all look at each other like, do you think this might be a civil case? That's a problem, and that's a problem society-wide. So I'm really encouraged to hear, some of your, city council members and the mayor and a representative from the police department, because you can set a tone for your town. You can set a culture for your town that this kind of behavior will not be tolerated here. I'm encouraged by that because that's where it starts, is that you start sending the message that it's not welcome here, and if you do this here, we have people that will respond, and you'll be held accountable. So pick somewhere else. And so thank you. Thank you for showing up. I'm here not specifically on behalf of the Attorney General, so anything that I say that may offend you, don't call her, because she doesn't actually know I'm here today. And it's likely I might say something. So if that happens, you can email me. I'll give you that information, or call me or whatever, or we can talk afterwards. But so my opinions are my own. But I can give a lot of credit to the Attorney General. 2019, her and I started the Elder Abuse Task Force for the state of Michigan. It is the largest, most active task force on this topic in the United States right now. It is the largest in the history of this state. And we pulled together the best of the best that we could get a hold of. It's jointly led by the Attorney General herself, and she regularly attends the meetings. We'll talk about some of the other stuff that she's done, and the Michigan Supreme Court. We have 2 sitting justices of the Michigan Supreme Court who actively participate on that task force. That's never happened before. So that's impressive. Over 100 members, over 55 organizations. Our promise at the beginning of this was not a task force to create a report to sit on somebody's shelf for the next 10 years and be satisfied with the work that we did. Because frankly, there's been a couple of those. There was one in 1999 by the Michigan Supreme Court that was on guardianships and conservatorships, and there was another one by Governor Granholm in 2007. And frankly, what I did when I brought this idea to the Attorney General was to go back to those 2 reports, take a look at them, and go, well, is that still a problem? And if so, then why don't we fix it instead of talk about it for another 10 years? And so the first 9 initiatives really, a couple were our own, and the rest came out of those reports and said, well, if it's still a problem, and we all know that, why don't we go back to do what some really smart people got together and suggested this is what it would take to fix it. So one of the issues, and we literally have been trying to get this done for 30 years in the state of Michigan, and that was to get banks and credit unions to become mandatory reporters in the state of Michigan on suspected financial exploitation. We begged, we pleaded, and honestly, until this task force, we never got anywhere. I invited them to be members of the task force. I said, the bad guys are going to have to come to you. That's where the money's at. It's not under the mattress, and it's not in a lockbox. It's in your building. So somehow, somewhere along the line, you could be involved in helping us stop this, or you could choose not to be. Help me write a law that you can live with that can help protect our senior citizens. And honestly, the head of the Credit Union Association and the Michigan Bankers Association were outstanding partners in this effort. They sat down literally meeting after meeting after meeting, and we carved out a bill. One of their complaints was, well, we make those reports and then we never hear anything. We contact Adult Protective Services. They don't let us know whatever happened. And so then, a week and a half later, when they come back in to get some more money out, I don't know, are we supposed to give it to them or not give it to them? Because we don't know what happened on the first one. That's fair. So now it actually creates a loop. They report to APS or law enforcement, and we have 10 days to get back to them and let them know, are we opening an investigation or are we not? And if they can't get a hold of one of those entities, they can contact the county prosecutor. We created a form that says, I've tried to notify, APS or law enforcement on these dates, didn't get any response, and I'm notifying you that we suspect this person has financially exploited somebody in our bank. And it also gives them the authority to freeze the bank account. And at first they're like, oh, we can't do that. I'm like, yeah, you can. And they're like, no, you can't. I said, well, yeah, you can, because if I leave town and I try to use my credit card somewhere else in the country and I didn't tell you ahead of time, you absolutely freeze it. That's kind of a regular thing. So I know you have that authority in your agreement. And they're like, well, yeah, actually we do. We just don't use it. I'm like, okay, this is the act. It went into effect last September. And so it required them to implement a policy and then train on it to recognize signs of covered financial exploitation, and then to report that to law enforcement or APS. And so that I've done trainings. My first assistant attorney general has done trainings. We've trained hundreds of bank and credit union employees across the state of Michigan. And then banks have also picked that up and continued to do their own training. So here, one of the things, and it's sort of a misunderstanding, is Michigan does not have an elder abuse statute. That's not the terminology we use. A lot of states do have that, we don't. In those states, what they do is they've said, okay, starting at this age and up, if you do these things, this person's entitled to some special protection under the law. We don't have that. We use the term vulnerable adult. And we've actually talked about what would be a definition for an elder adult in the state of Michigan. And we've talked to AARP, we've talked to Elder Law Michigan, we've talked to the Prosecutors Association, and it kind of came down to it's 15 years older than whatever you are. And we can't really write that into the law, but frankly, that's kind of how it came down. We're like, well, I used to think my present age was old. Now I'm here, I'm like, nah, not yet. But 15 years from now, okay, I'll probably be getting close. And so we don't have that. We use this. And it basically means anybody who's over the age of 18, or 18 and over, excuse me, because of age, developmental disability, mental illness, or physical disability, requires supervision or personal care, or lacks the personal and social skills required to live independently. That's a big fancy way of saying they need the assistance with the activities of daily living. Do they have somebody who helps them get up in the morning, get breakfast, get dressed, take their meds, do their banking, driving, taking care of themselves, taking care of their household? If they have to have assistance to do that, then they're a vulnerable adult. And here's the rationale behind that, is that means I'm dependent on somebody else to help me get through the day. Now we don't have an equal power relationship. Think back, we did this, and especially for law enforcement, we went through this whole thing with domestic violence prosecutions and in the early 90s. And what we figured out was that difference in power in the relationship meant you could compel that person to stay. You could compel that person to do whatever you wanted them to do. It's the same thing. And we've had situations where, grandkid is living now in the house with grandma. Comes to grandma and says, hey, I need $1,000. Well, I don't have $1,000 to give you. Boy, that's disappointing. Because tomorrow I was supposed to pick up your heart medicine. Or not. When grandma gives them the $1,000, is that voluntary? No. But if our traditional way of investigating that is to ask grandma, well, did you give him the money? And the answer is, yeah, I gave him the money. We don't have a crime. We missed it. Okay, so that's why we need to understand the relationship, so then we can understand the coercive part of that relationship. And so what are the things the banks can do? They can contact Adult Protective Services, law enforcement, or the prosecutors. And then the kind of things that we ask them is, how long has this person banked with you? And has there been any changes in their banking habits? And traditionally, here's what we see. You have a fixed income, Social Security hits the account second, third of the month. They're in there 3-4 days later. They will wait in line often till their teller becomes available. And then they will take out, $100, get their hair done, get the car filled up, that kind of stuff. And then see them next month. And everything else is either auto pay or is taken care of, from checks at home. And then one day they show up with somebody else that the bank's never seen before. And now we're taking out $10,000 in cash. That's a problem. And the failure of banks to go, okay, wait a minute, that's never happened. That's weird. We should separate grandma and ask her a few questions. The failure of that to happen has allowed these people to steal billions of dollars nationwide, okay? And so what we've advised the banks is you get in that situation, slow everything down, bring grandma in, make, whoever else is can sit in the lobby. And if you still have concerns after talking to them, pick up the phone and call law enforcement. Because once that money walks out of the bank, it never, ever comes back. The police can investigate it. I can prosecute them. I can send them to jail. Money's gone. It's usually gone to the casino, the drug dealer, somewhere. It's not coming back. And so now I have them in jail and an IOU for your life savings. That's not much of a win, okay? And so let's skip through some of this. So one of the other things that we did as part of the task force is back in the 90s, I helped design an investigative form that was then mandated by statute to be adopted by every police agency in the state of Michigan. And it was a domestic violence investigation form. Because what we found is domestic violence cases are pretty similar. I mean, you've got a certain relationship with this person and you're living together or whatever. And then there's some kind of factors that come into play. There's threats, there's the use of threats, there's firearms or sometimes substance abuse, all of these kind of things. And so we would create a form to go, okay, if everybody investigates this the same way, we're gonna get a more consistent result instead of just going, department by department and hope they ask all the right questions. Well, we decided to do the same thing with adult abuse, neglect, or financial exploitation, is because, again, these cases are different than other cases in that it's never a whodunit. Law enforcement will know within 5 minutes of being on the property who the potential suspect is. Because, like with domestic violence, the bad guy's been involved in a process of isolating grandma And so grandma's not going to church like she used to. The other family members are not coming over because they're not welcome. The neighbors don't get to come over and hang out like they used to. They're cutting off access to anybody who could help her. And so when you come on, there's only a very small group of people that ever see or have contact with grandma. Well, then one of them is the bad guy, okay? And I'll talk a lot about intrafamily because frankly, even though, you know, the phone scams and the computer scams and the contractor scams and all of that each pull a percentage, it's still 75% plus is family members. So that's why I'll talk about some of that stuff at the end, just because, you know, you can kind of lump them all together because they're all using similar techniques. So this form has been distributed to every law enforcement association in the state. So the Michigan Sheriff's Association, the Michigan State Police, the Michigan Association of Chiefs of Police, and the Prosecutors Association. And if they follow this form, they can walk through and go, is this abuse? Is this neglect? Is this financial exploitation? And then part of that process, they'll go through and document, you know, what they saw at the scene. What was the physical condition of grandma when they came in? You know, you know, did she have injuries? Did she have, you know, what was the condition of the house? Had she been fed? Is she dehydrated? You know, and again, I'll use she because most of the time it's women because they outlive men. We just can't run out of gas, I guess. I don't know what happens, but the majority of elder adults are women. And so oftentimes when that spouse passes away, suddenly, you know, adult son, grandson, whoever moves into the house to, you know, help them. And unfortunately, most of the time it's to help themselves to whatever they own. So law enforcement has that tool. We're encouraging them to continue to use it. We have video trainings now out through the Elder Abuse Task Force that have gone out to every police agency in the state so they can have their officers pull them up online. And it's us teaching them this is what we look for and this is what we do. So the other things that what you need to be looking for is, you know, with your friends, your neighbors, the people you go to church with, the people you have contact with, because the more eyes and ears we have out there, the more you're likely to notice that there's been some kind of change. And those changes can be pretty dramatic. And so when that happens, don't go, well, you know, it just is what it is. If somebody has gone to your church for 20 years every single weekend, and then then it goes to every 3 or 4 months and then not at all, that's a problem. Somebody needs to be making contact with them, and whether it's the pastor or you or somebody needs to go over and go, I want to talk to them. We've talked to Meals on Wheels workers who helped us flag cases because they were out there every day. And then all of a sudden, you know, grandkid moves in and now it's like, yeah, she's sleeping, just give me the food. Or she's not feeling good, just, you know, give it to me and I'll take it in. And all of a sudden, weeks and weeks and weeks go by, they've not seen them. That's a problem, okay? Because again, you know, there could be physical abuse, there has been cases of sexual abuse, there's been neglect, financial exploitation, emotional abuse. A lot of times the threat is if you call or talk to anybody, I'll drop you in a nursing home so fast and make your head spin. That's the number one fear of folks in this generation, is ending up in a nursing home. And so they will put up with an awful lot of horrible things because that threat is, you know, pretty real. Okay? So yeah, if you see that withdrawal from normal activities or changes in their alertness or, you know, they have what appears to be recurrent depression, the change in their hygiene is a key factor because it could be a result of, you know, some kind of progression of mental illness, or it could be the fact that whoever's now controlling the household doesn't let them or doesn't help them. Unusual weight gain or loss, the unwillingness or inability to talk with family or friends, changes in their financial situation. One of the things we ask law enforcement to do is if you go out, ask them, where's your checkbook? Can we look at it together? When was the last time you saw your own checkbook? And if the answer is 3 months, 4 months, that's a huge red flag. And then when we do look at it, you'll see checks to the caregiver, you know, to the grandkid, checks to cash. The check to cash thing is a huge warning. The reason being is because, with all due respect, folks in this generation, and my mom's 83, I actually walked her through this scenario and she started laughing. She's like, yeah, that's me. I said, they you'll wait behind them in the line at Walmart while they cash in, 4 coupons and write out a check for $17.87 while you lose your mind. And, but they won't write a $3,000 check for cash. That's not how they handle their finances. So if, as law enforcement, you take a look and it's like 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, whatever, somebody's stealing the money. The other thing is, if you see a pattern of online banking activity, now, though there's a small percentage, and it is growing, but it's still pretty small, of seniors who use online banking, most of the time not. Most of the time, you can pretty much count on that's the suspect. The other thing is, if you see a pattern of ATM withdrawals, if it's like bang, 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 the ATM, and it's the maximum amount, somebody's stealing it. Why? Because, again, seniors don't generally hit the ATM every day, and they certainly don't max it every day. If you see that pattern, somebody's stealing the money. So, all right, so the definition is any inappropriate access to an elder person's funds or property is a form of financial exploitation or abuse. So it could be a caregiver who either pulls their checks, sometimes they become the rep payee on their Social Security, and they siphon that money off. We've had cases, our healthcare fraud division handles crimes against people in nursing homes. We had a whole project where nursing homes were contacting our division because they were finding the patient pay portion was not being paid. And then once they found out the details, it's because, granddaughter is the rep payee and they're siphoning off the money. That's stealing. That's not their money. And so we prosecuted them. Sometimes, and one of the other things that I ask law enforcement to do is get a credit report. Because, again, seniors generally don't max credit cards, and they also don't have 10 of them. They might have one, but they don't have 10. And so you pull a credit report and you see a whole bunch of them, chances are they don't even know those exist. And what happens is the person who's living in the house with them will intercept the statement because they'll go get the mail. And they pull the statement out and then, go from there. So those are just things that we are asking law enforcement to look for because they're pretty telltale signs. They can steal cash, they can steal household goods. We've had people who took, coin collections, gun collections, stamps, china, other pieces of furniture. And all of a sudden, one of the relatives comes over and they're like, "Where's your china cabinet?" Not sure. I mean, what do you mean you're not sure? How'd somebody walk out with the china cabinet full of dishes? Well, it's because, our bad guy sold it to somebody. The other thing is they can forge the elder's signature. And they can go on and get their own credit cards because they'll have access to all of the vital data, date of birth, social security number, address. They can just go online. And you can go online. I have a case right now we're investigating. It's over $125,000 of purchases from Amazon on grandma's card. So again, these are the things that we look for. Are there large withdrawals? Are there things that are missing? Are there sudden changes in the will or the power of attorney or, or transfers of the car titles and things like that? And I just talked to, a couple weeks ago, the elder law section of the Bar Association. And I said, look, you guys are partners in this. These are people that you have done financial plans for, and maybe those are 20, 30, 40 years of you planning out their financial future so that they would be secure, and then somebody swoops in, takes them to another lawyer, and scraps all of that stuff to have it signed over to the grandkid. And I keep telling them that's going to keep happening until I find the lawyer who does it, and I'm going to prosecute them for aiding and abetting financial exploitation. Because I said, when that happens, the grandkid who brought them in is not your client. The elder adult is. Well, you need to ask, do you already have a will? Well, let me call the lawyer who drafted that one, and let me ask, why are you coming to me instead of the guy that you've been going to for 30 years? That's a problem. And reason being is because this is grandkid's lawyer. And we've had several of those, actually, sadly enough. And this is one, frankly, prosecutors get wrong, law enforcement gets wrong, everybody else gets wrong. If you put somebody's name on your account, and inevitably this is granddaughter, grandson, gets her name put on grandma's account so that they can help pay the bills, that gives you access to the account. It does not give you ownership over the money in the account. If I put, it's my social security that's into that account, you don't have the authority to write money out of it, even if your name's on the account. That is called embezzlement from a joint account holder. It's against the law in the state of Michigan. It's been against the law since 2000. So it's not a new one, but we inevitably get that one wrong. Because the problem is it conflicts a little bit with banking rules. And the banking rules are, well, it's your together account. Well, technically that's true because you can put money in and take money out. You do not have the authority to just take the money out. It's not your money. And when I do law enforcement training, I'm like, look, picture it this way. The bank is a big fancy coffee can. If I put all the money in the coffee can, even though I write your name and my name both on the outside and you come and take the money out, that's stealing. And you need to be prosecuted. So, okay. The other thing is what we watch for, especially we ask law enforcement to look for, is you go there and you start seeing past due notices. Past due notices on utilities, past due notices on taxes, property taxes particularly. And I can tell you this because, again, this generation will go without food before they won't pay their property tax. I know that for a fact because they saw people lose their houses in their lifetimes. That will not happen to them. So if that goes unpaid, somebody stole the money. I've never been wrong, not in that. Okay, I've been wrong on all kinds of other stuff, but not that one. Okay?
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
If you make somebody power of attorney,
Yep.
can they get into your bank account?
That is a great question, and I have a little section just on powers of attorney, because that, other than the joint bank account holder, that's the other one that law enforcement and prosecutors struggle with, and they're wrong. So let me go through that in just a minute. Let me talk just about general scams out there right now, and we've been talking a lot of, when we do these trainings, when we do these trainings about explaining the kind of scam. And we're sort of changing that a little bit. And the reason being is because the scams keep changing. So I want to tell you that there's 5, and now by next week there'll be 10 because the bad guys kind of keep getting out in front of us. So, and they do. They include jury duty scams, IRS scams, grandparent scams, romance scams. Now there's a new one, which is a computer virus, lock your computer scam that they pretend it comes from Microsoft and so all of that, all of those are out there and they're all active, okay? But they all share kind of some common things, and that is the mechanisms with which they will ask you to send them money. So no matter what the particular explanation is, it's going to come down to these 4 things. They're going to ask you to go buy a bunch of gift cards and give them the money on the phone. Give them the numbers, okay? Anybody who asks you to do that is stealing from you. There is no legitimate business that says, go to Walmart, buy a stack of gift cards, and then read us the numbers. Nobody ever does that who's a legitimate business. So if they ask that, they're going to steal money from you, okay? Second one is the new one. This is we've seen several of these just in the last 2 weeks. They're going to ask you to go to one of those Bitcoin kiosks that you're now seeing pop up in gas stations and either transfer money from your account or put money in, buy Bitcoin, and send it to their account. No legitimate business asks you to go to a kiosk and convert real money into cryptocurrency because literally before you walk out of there, it will be moved out of your account into their account to 3 other accounts, and it'll be somewhere in the Eastern Bloc, or Jamaica, or the last one we ran into was India. They pulled $750,000. We intercepted $200,000 in California. The other $550,000 was already in India, and we'll never see it again. So anybody asks you to go to a kiosk and put money in, don't, okay? That's a scam. The other one is wire transfer. So asking you to wire from your bank account to somebody else's account, And then the last one is Western Union, those kind of transfers. Again, legitimate businesses either take credit cards, wire transfers from the bank to somebody that you can confirm, or a check. Those are all legitimate. They don't want credit cards because you can try to reverse the charge. Once you figure out you've been screwed, if you get that fast enough, you can report it as fraud and then reverse the charge. They don't want that. The gift cards, you can't do that. So if they ask you to pay in any one of those forms I've talked about, and I don't care what the explanation is, don't do it. Okay? The jury duty one is you missed jury duty, you got to give us $500 on gift cards or we're going to issue a warrant for your arrest. Okay? I've been a lawyer since 1987. I've been a prosecutor for 30 years. Never, ever in my career did we ever issue a warrant for somebody's arrest because they missed jury duty one time. Never. It will never, ever happen. The other thing is if you're over 70, technically you're exempt from service if you choose to. So we're not going to issue a warrant for your arrest when you can just say, I don't want to come. We got plenty to do. I also promise you, and I'm glad Lieutenant's here, you ever been sent out to arrest anybody for not appearing on jury duty? No. How long you been an officer? Yeah. It doesn't happen, okay? So trust me. The other thing is the IRS never calls anybody, ever. Now, they might send you scary letters threatening to do horrible things to you, seize everything you own, garnish your paycheck, do all that stuff. They are too busy and too lazy. They're not picking up the phone and going, Bob, we noticed that you're a little behind on your taxes, and if you don't send them in, we're going to issue a warrant for your arrest. I promise you, if you live to be 120, that will never happen, okay? So if they're calling, that's not it. Grandparent scam. This is grandkid, and they're pulling this stuff off of Facebook. So I got to tell you, if you're using Facebook to show, how proud you are of your grandkids, you are setting yourself up because they're scanning Facebook to go, oh, so you have a granddaughter named Mary. So now we're going to have a female call you and say, hey, this is Mary. You go, oh, or sometimes even if they don't know the name, they'll go, hey, Grandma, oh, Mary. So now we know your name is Mary, and here we go. And that whole process, the explanation is one of two things. Either they've been in an accident and they're in the hospital and you need to give gift cards over the phone or they won't get treatment. That is absolutely never going to happen. It is against the law in all 50 states to refuse emergency treatment to somebody who needs it because they can't pay, period. The hospital is, first of all, they could be criminally prosecuted. They will absolutely be sued. That will never, ever happen. The second one is, I've been arrested, I'm in jail, and if you don't give me the gift cards over the phone for bail, I'm going to stay here. I always ask, when was the last time that you talked to your grandchild? How many within the last, teenager or, particularly in their 20s? When was the last time? Within the last week? Every day? Oh, okay, that's really good. Because most of the time I hear, it's been a little while. Well, my position is, if you don't call me regularly, I should not be your only phone call from the jail for bail. Period. And the other thing is, I shouldn't be it anyway. Why don't you call your mom or your dad? That's how you know it's a scam, okay? And I always tell them, take 24 hours. If they are in jail, chances are they probably deserve to be there. 24 hours will give them time to reflect on maybe bad judgment. And that will give you time to call and go, hey, is Bobby in jail? No, Bobby's in the living room sitting next to us. Oh, okay. Problem is, these are always done, they're usually done late in the afternoon or very early in the morning when maybe we're not quite as sharp, and it's always an emergency. And so they get you in fight or flight mode, and then you do something that normally you would never do. Okay? So really kind of keep reviewing this stuff because it will happen at some point. Okay, and then romance scams are you start, some kind of online contact through Facebook or through whoever, and you think this is a, very mature, responsible, handsome, good-looking, whatever person that you want a relationship with, and it's actually some big hairy gorilla from Romania, and you're now going to transfer your life savings to help that person who's probably part of the Russian mob. A lot of these come out of the Eastern Bloc countries. And so, yeah, you don't want to do that, okay? Any questions on all those? Okay. All right, so parasitic living arrangements, this is what we're asking law enforcement to look at, is going, okay, so now here's kind of our stereotypical mode, and that is, it is adult child in their 40s, lives in mom's basement, dad's passed away, and they have a medical marijuana card, they play video games all day and live off of mama's Social Security. If that's any of your relatives, I'm sorry, but that's I see a lot of those, okay? So we're asking, is there a parasitic living relationship here? Is there only one income coming into the house and that's grandma's? and then what we took was her money and now we're both living off of it, that's a problem, okay? And so, again, oftentimes that means the money is going to be used to go to the casino, and we've had it. I have videos from casinos where grandma's stuck at a 1 cent slot machine, and everybody else is playing on her money at all the fun stuff, you know. And so, yeah, that's a problem. Again, who's paying for those trips? Who's got control of the checkbook? And then what we do as part of this, and this is what we're asking law enforcement to do, is go back 2 years before grandkid, kid, whoever moved in. Chart the spending and the income. And the reason being is because, again, we're talking about people who generally aren't a fixed income. So it could be Social Security, pension, annuity, something. So that income line is stable. And then you can also chart their expenses. And again, when I deal with new officers, this is where I kind of lose them. I said, this generation does this weird thing. I said, follow me, because it's true, is they figure out how much money they make, and then they spend less than that. And you can see all the young officers are like, what? And I'm like, I know, it sounds really weird, but they actually keep that line of spending below the line of income, and they take the gap between those two, and they call it savings. And again, these guys in their 20s are like, I don't even understand what you're saying. I said, because the rest of us, we figured out, here's my income and here's my credit card, cap, and I'm bouncing somewhere in between there. Not this generation. That's not how they were raised. That's not how they live. And so when you see that running along for 2 years, and then grandkid moves in, and then the spending goes up, and then the savings goes down, what's the only thing that changed? Somebody else got a hold of the money. So that helps us backtrack. And I do exactly that for a jury. I'm like, here's the graph, and then it goes, psh, well, what happened? Grandma didn't suddenly go, you know what I think I need to do? I need to take all my life savings that I've spent my entire life putting together and putting away so I wouldn't be a burden on my kids, and I'm going to go blow it at the casino this next month. That never happens, okay? So somebody else is stealing it. And I have. I had one, and this was actually a neighbor, befriended him, took $125,000. They moved her into their house to help take care of her, and then made 65 visits to the casino in the next year on her money. So we talked about, yeah. So the other thing we're asking law enforcement, look at the ownership. Is there deeds? Are there car titles? Is there a power of attorney? Is there a guardianship, conservatorship, any of that? And then one of the things that's important, and this is to your power of attorney question, the power of attorney does not give you the authority to steal. It doesn't. In fact, 2012, they redid the statute in the state of Michigan so that a power of attorney, it creates a fiduciary relationship. And what that means is every decision that I do and every action that I take has to be for the benefit of the person I'm the attorney for. That's the law, okay? So what we do is, the other thing is, as part of our statute, you're required to keep a copy of all of the income and all of the expenditures while you're power of attorney. That's mandated. And upon request, you have to produce an accounting. That's all in the statute. So when somebody says, I have a power of attorney, oftentimes the response from law enforcement and prosecutors are going, well, okay, well then they have the authority to act. They have an authority to act directly for the benefit of the person that they're the attorney. So then we start looking through expenditures, and these are great interviews because you sit across from the suspect and say, okay, I'm glad you got a power of attorney. Can I see your receipts for the last 2 years for all the money that you spent and all the money that came in? And then you get that kind of deer in the headlights look, because did you know people don't accurately track the money they're stealing? It's been my experience. No, they don't. The other thing is they don't pay taxes on it, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So that kind of locks them up. And then you go, okay, well, I did do some checking because I found that there's 2 brand new snowmobiles that are titled in your name, and grandma's in a wheelchair. Can you tell me how the purchase of the 2 snowmobiles benefited your grandma? Then you really get the deer in the headlights look, because it's really, really hard to explain that. Now in my county, sometimes it's a Camaro, sometimes it's a 4-wheel drive with a lift kit that we now bought on grandma's credit because our credit sucks. And that's the way. And I'm like, well, maybe grandma wants to get to, doctor visits in style and all of that, but she can't really get up into the 4-wheel drive with a lift kit. So that's probably the kid. It's those kind of things where we take a few minutes and look at, let me run, the Secretary of State record, go, how many vehicles are titled in grandma's name? Well, if grandma hasn't driven in 5 years, shouldn't be any, maybe one, and it'll be an older one. It won't be a hopped up new one, okay? So if that happens, that's a red flag. Okay, has there been a second mortgage? Is there a recent quitclaim deed? Is somebody playing around with the property title? Again, we talked about credit cards. Let's see. So the folks we're going to be talking to as part of our police investigation, family and friends, neighbors, people they go to church with, people at the bank. We're going to talk to the doctor. And we're going to ask them, go tell me what their physical condition is. Tell me what their mental condition is, because one of the things that you'll see in doctor's notes is a little bit of a mini mental exam. They were oriented as to time and place and knew who the president was and all that stuff. So that's important. But one of the things we ask is, ask the other question, what medications are they on? Because I can tell you there's certain kind of medications that will jack up your mental acuity. Chantix, the anti-smoking med, for some people will create symptoms very similar to dementia. Dehydration, the symptoms of dehydration in an adult senior and dementia are almost indistinguishable. So if they have a pattern of dehydration, they're now a vulnerable adult because their mental acuity has been dramatically affected by this particular thing. Urinary tract infection will do the same thing. So those are questions to ask the doctor. The other thing I always ask the doctor, even if they find all that stuff, is I'll see in these notes, explain the medication regimen to the patient and their caregiver. I always go, Doc, why did you explain it to both? Well, I want to make sure that they don't take the blue pill on the wrong day or take 3 of them. Okay? Well, if they can't figure out and remember how to take the blue pill, should they sign off everything they own to somebody else? And the doctor's like, yeah, no, I don't think that's a good idea. That's a vulnerable adult. That's financial exploitation. We haven't been asking the right questions to get the medical field to come in and help us explain to the jury what's really going on here, okay? So yeah, we talked about a lot of this. Let's see. We've asked, asked the doctor, in their present condition, would you feel comfortable with them making complex financial decisions? And I had a doctor one time tell me if I were on the meds that she's on, because she was going through cancer treatment, so there was, some Ativan, some morphine, all that. He's like, if I were on her dosage, I'd be sitting in my office drooling in my own lap. I would not be in a position to make complex financial decisions. Well, then I need to explain to the jury that when they signed that deed, somebody stole their property, okay? So that part's important. So here's the main statutes that we use: embezzlement by an agent. So if you're a power of attorney and you take money that you use for yourself instead of for the person you're the attorney in fact for, that's embezzlement by an agent. Embezzlement from a vulnerable adult, most of our prosecutions have been under this. And I actually had the privilege of helping to draft this statute, and we adopted it back in 2001. And then every prosecution I've ever done has been under this statute. Embezzlement from a joint account, we talked about that. Larceny by conversion, that's I give you the money to go pay the property taxes, and instead you take it. I gave it to you legally, and you accepted it legally, but then you siphoned it off for something else. That's larceny by conversion. And then several of these are predicate acts for racketeering. So we had one of the cases that we took all the way to the Court of Appeals. And that guy was a financial advisor and did it through his company. So because he was a financial advisor, he was an agent. So we tagged him with embezzlement from an agent. Let's see. Yeah, we did it from embezzlement from an agent and embezzlement from a vulnerable adult. And that gentleman's now doing 9 to 20 years in the state's prison because we hit him for racketeering as well, because he used the corporate entity to do that. Well, let me just read the statute real quick. A person shall not, through fraud, deceit, misrepresentation, coercion, or unjust enrichment, obtain or use or attempt to obtain or use a vulnerable adult's money or property to directly or indirectly benefit that person themselves, knowing or having a reason to know the vulnerable adult is a vulnerable adult. I've never done it under fraud, deceit, misrepresentation, or coercion. Every one of them are done under unjust enrichment. And the reason being is because we asked law enforcement to ask right up front, tell me what you do for your grandma. Oh, lots of stuff. I do the banking, I help her get up in the morning, I cook breakfast, I give her medication, I mow the yard, I do this and that. All of those things helps us establish they knew she was a vulnerable adult. And they're more than willing to brag about how much help grandma, gets and how much they need. I'm like, perfect, write it all down. Well, I noticed that you paid yourself $50,000 in the last 6 months. Because I saw the checks for cash. I saw the checks to yourself. Well, for that, they hire me. And I have a couple references, I think. But bottom line is, it never matches what they did. It's always more. That's called unjust enrichment. That's why every one of these breaks down to you always took more money than you did stuff for. Okay? Yes, sir. I have. The question is, what happens if they die, before we prosecute or during the prosecution? It really comes down to what evidence do I have that they were a vulnerable adult before then and how documented that is, and then if I can do the unjust enrichment. And because honestly, a lot of these have happened that way in that as they got closer to death and more vulnerable, it accelerates because they know I have a limited window of time when I still have control of all the money. And after that, the relatives are going to know, they're going to show up at the funeral knowing grandma's dead. Well, grandma had, kids and then grandkids. So everybody else starts, asking questions. Well, the answer is there's no money in the account. Why? Because it just disappeared in the last week. So I have, in fact, we have a priest that we're prosecuting in Lansing right now who ran a retreat center for retired priests, and one of those priests is dead. And he stole $300,000 from him in the last 2 months of his life. He clearly was a vulnerable adult. He did it, siphoned it off, put it in another charity that he had control over to spend on whatever he chose to. And now we're going to send him to prison. So, okay. I just want to explain a couple things because you hear these terms around. I'm not sure everybody understands what they are. So a guardian, both of these are, by the way, are appointed by the probate court. So there is no voluntary, I can, become guardian over somebody else. It's a court-ordered relationship. And it's covered under the probate code. And it means that I have control over the welfare and safety of that person. So as the guardian, I'm going to decide where you live. If that in your house, is it in a nursing home? What medical care that you receive? If it's home health care or you need to be somewhere else, I have control over your person. Conservator, it's control over your money. And those two sometimes probate judges, if they don't have enough of both, they'll appoint a guardian and conservator. They'll have them do both of the same role, but they're distinct responsibilities. And there are times when it's like, okay, I can get up in the morning, I can take care of myself and get through the day, but I really have now lost, because of dementia or Alzheimer's or whatever, lost the ability to handle finances. Then you need a conservator, okay? And so the court can appoint that. One of the things that we're encouraging people to do, and the elder law section of the bar has been really helpful, is if you don't choose anybody, then the probate court is going to choose them for you when you get petitioned in and no longer have the ability to pick. If you execute a power of attorney and you use an attorney to do it, don't get one off the internet because those don't necessarily comply with Michigan law. But you should, when you leave this place, do two things. Do a power of attorney for medical treatment, like today. And the reason being is because you get hit by a bus coming out of this parking lot and you can't make medical care decisions for yourself, the court will appoint a temporary guardian to tell the hospital whether they could drill a hole in your head to save your life. Michigan, we're working on through the task force a family consent statute that would set up, a lot of other states have it, we're going to get it, but it's going to take a little bit, where they will go to whoever the next family member is. But if you haven't designated somebody through a patient advocate designation or a power of attorney, it may not be the person that you want. I have 3 kids. 2 out of 3, yeah, I absolutely trust. My daughter, who I love to death, dropped me in the nursing home so fast it'd make my head spin. She's just not wired like, she's like, well, if you can't take care of yourself, I'll put you someplace where they can take care of you. Okay, thank you. Could we hire somebody to come in? I got money. And so that may not be the one you want. You lose that opportunity once you become unable to execute those documents. So once you don't have legal capacity anymore, you're not going to make that choice. Some judge somewhere who's got 150 cases that day is going to make it in about 3.5 minutes. Okay, so don't put yourself in that position. Same thing with finances. There's two different kinds. There's one that they can give you the authority while I'm alive and coherent. We can kind of both run my money. Or there's one that when I no longer am able to run my money, then you have the authority to pay my bills and do all the other stuff so that I don't lose my house, my medical insurance, I don't lose all those things. Those two documents, it's a little bit of money, but they're your opportunity to go, wait a minute, I know my family and I know who can handle this responsibility. And some of it may be none of them. So I'm picking somebody out. Okay, but don't let the court do it. Okay? Okay, yes.
And when you're talking about these things and putting these things in place like power of attorney and guardianship, et cetera, and you have still have a capacity to do it, will you maybe at the end of your presentation direct us to where maybe online we can find those?
Yeah, those, my advice is contact an attorney who specializes in elder law. And you can actually contact the State Bar Association. There's an entire section of lawyers who specialize in elder law. And whether it's estate planning or it's these kind of things, talk to somebody who knows what they're doing. Don't do it off the internet. Don't just download a form, because if you mess it up, the form goes in the trash and then it's back to the court picks it for you. Okay? So be a little proactive. Do it while you can. Again, the fact that you have a will doesn't mean you're going to die. The fact that you have a power of attorney doesn't mean you're going to lose the ability and capacity to make your own decisions. So do it while you can, so that you're making the call, okay? No, it's okay.
These are attorneys that we can find online.
Yep, you go on the State Bar of Michigan website, and you can actually find out who's in the elder law section of the bar. And then there's a lot of attorneys who advertise that they are in the section. Pick one of them. I just spoke at their conference a couple weeks ago. They're trained specifically on the new laws that are coming out for, to cover these areas. And they've also been a super, super active participant in the Elder Abuse Task Force, because they want this done right. They want to help. And so, talk to one of them. Okay, Adult Protective Services. Oh, I'm sorry, yeah.
Friendship Center has an elder law attorney come once a
Oh,
month.
good. Yeah,
It's
clinic.
different subjects every month, so call Friendship Center and they will direct you to the lawyer.
Good, all right. So that's APS's hotline. They've been trained on elder financial exploitation. I trained every operator in the state of Michigan. That's the miracle of Zoom. Could never have done that until we hit COVID, and then took me 2 weeks. But they were on multiple shifts at multiple times, and we did like 300 of them. So if you know of somebody that you believe is a victim of either abuse, neglect, or financial exploitation and is an adult, call them. We have a hotline, 1-800-24-ABUSE, and if you have questions or concerns or a complaint, call them. And they'll, if it's something that needs to go to my division, they route it there. If it's something where they think you need to contact APS or law enforcement, they'll route you there. Okay, there's my division. That's my contact information. And we handle, half of our division handles child support, deadbeat dad prosecutions. The other half is all white collar crime. So we have an elder abuse prosecution unit in there. We also do tax evasion, insurance fraud, securities fraud, most of which targets elder adults. It's, the phony investments, the Ponzi scams, those kind of things. Not enough. But that's my number, 335-7560. Or call the main line and ask for my division and they will direct you. I wanted to leave just a little time for questions. And I can't, within certain parameters, I can't give you specific legal advice because I work for the state of Michigan and that's the only client I have that I, can do. But if you have other general questions, I can do those. Yeah.
This situation involves my brother with my nephew, his son, who definitely has done all this. But he was a representative payee through Social Security.
Mm-hmm.
And even when he became that, one of my sisters, we suspected this would happen. She went to Social Security and said there's really nothing we can do. So they wouldn't do anything. Now, it's been so many years later, and we can definitely prove it, and there's a case at the Redford Police.
Okay.
But it's very slow. So Chase Bank allowed my nephew, and his wife had access to it too. A Rep AZE account is very specific on who has access, who's supposed to be on it. She was taking money out right and left, the wife, she's not on that account. They allow them to get $806 in arrears, and then just keep this account going, and I doubt if it was ever reported, and I wanna know what's gonna happen to Chase Bank, because they didn't do what they should have done.
Yeah, the problem is the statute for mandatory reporting just went into effect September
Oh, just
of
this
last
year?
year.
Or September of what year?
Last year,
2022?
2022, yeah.
Okay,
And
what
so it
happened
was,
after that?
yeah, it was September 26th. And so
Okay.
at that point, then if it happened and nobody flagged it and reported it, make contact with the fraud officer in that bank and go, okay.
So we contact the fraud officer, or should the Redford Police do that as part of their investigation?
Yeah,
Or
well,
should I'm willing to do it.
yeah, I would do it just to go, hey, do you know that you blew this one? And can somebody tell me what happened, why we didn't catch
And
that?
it's also basically totally over $50,000 that they stole, because it was a small inheritance from our father.
Okay.
So what kind of, if he goes to jail and his wife, and I hope they do, what kind of sentence could we possibly expect?
Yeah, it depends.
If they're proved and
Sure.
everything.
Michigan has felonies that break down 1,000 to 20,000 is a 5-year, 20,000 to 50,000 is a 10, 50,000 to 100,000 is 15, and over 100,000 is a 20-year felony. Now, that's the maximum, but Michigan has what's called indeterminate sentencing, so there's always a minimum, like a 3 to 10 or 3 to 20. So a lot of that's going to depend on the judge. I know initially when I first started this work in 1997, judges were like, did anybody die in this? Anybody go to the hospital? Anybody get beat up? And I have seen significant changes from the bench, maybe because they got older and their parents got older, but now I'm seeing more prison sentences for this, because I'm like, there's no deterrent effect if somebody doesn't go to prison for stealing $50,000. There's none.
Also about the social security, why wouldn't they do anything?
Yeah, I know we've,
Even now, we've sent them letters, we've sent them copies of the Chase Bank statements we got, and Mrs. Patel said there's just no way to prove it, it's hard to prove it.
Yeah,
I
well,
don't think so, and that's.
Social Security, it's tough because they're very limited on what information that they can share.
Right,
And the other thing is, just like what you said, we've had cases where I'm investigating somebody for stealing all the other stuff, and we figure they're stealing the Social Security too. So we'll make that complaint, that we believe that this person's committing a crime. And then it's a rather complicated process for Social Security to remove somebody. There's a due process,
and we've already got.
you know, thing.
But it took forever.
Yeah.
Because we didn't know.
It's
how
way
to-
slower. I mean, it's the federal government. It's way slower than it should be. Yeah.
Well, we're working on things.
Okay, you talked about the living wills and everything.
Yep.
Now, does the same thing apply, like if I have a trust,
Yep.
if the trust is in, for in my name.
Right.
As well as the person I got over.
The trustee, right? Yeah, no, see, I think that again, if your assets go into trust, then they're not going into probate the other direction, so yeah, you've already taken that step. Yep. Yeah, and it kind of varies depending on what attorney you talk to. Normally, if you have a threshold of a certain amount of assets, talk to an elder attorney about a trust. Because again, then you get to dictate what's going on with your money. If you don't do it, and you pass away, and you don't have a will, and you don't have a trust, it's gonna go into probate court, and it's done according to a statute. So with the trust, you can go, okay, well, all my kids are idiots. I'm hoping by the time they hit 40, they'll straighten out. So nobody gets anything until they're 40. You can do that. When I was in law school, there were 5 Court of Appeals cases from the Dodge Trust, the Dodge Family Trust, Dodge Brothers, because a lot of their kids were idiots. And then their grandkids were idiots. But the mom, who was one of the original owners, her and her husband and his brother and his wife started this company together, worked 18, 19 hours a week, 7 days a week. The deal was she was the trustee. When everybody else passed away, she had control over all of it. And she said, here's the deal. Everybody gets a $50,000 a year stipend and a job at Dodge if you want one. So you put the 50 away, work a real job for a little while, you don't have to work ever again. Yeah, they don't want to do that. 5 different times they sued her to break the trust. They also had a poison pill provision in the trust, which is you sue the trust and you lose, you're out. So she's like, bring it. Now, if you're the Dodge family, you hire the best lawyers in the country to write the trust. They went 5-0. Kids, grandkids, bunch of people got kicked out. Oh yeah, it was fascinating. 5 times. I remember we're looking at it in law school, going, "Wow!" I mean, these guys. She's like, "If you want to work," she goes, "This is not your money. Where were you when we were working 7 days a week, 18 hours a day? You weren't even thought of yet. So you know what? It's my money. It's my call. Get a job. You'll do really well. Sit on your butt. Better learn to live on 50,000." Which, at the time that was a lot of money. Now it's not so much, but.
Something else I did, when they was giving all these calls from Indians that come in, I reported them to the federal.
Yeah, IC3.
Later, they shut down New York.
Oh, the robocall? Yeah. Well, and our attorney general joined with, I think it was 40 other attorney generals in a nationwide lawsuit against one of the largest telemarketing, like robocall groups in the country. She hates them. She used to tell when we were traveling around. And again, when you talk about personal commitment, when we started the task force, she did 12 speaking stops around the state, 2,500 miles. The attorney general herself went to every single one of those. And usually one, if not both, of the Supreme Court justices. And she'd always say, there's literally, I think it's 1 billion robocalls in America every year. And she would say her mom got half of those. So, and you got the other half. But we shut them down. So, okay, one more question. Yes.
How do I know my credit union subscribes to my protection?
Well, first of all, go ask them. Go, hey, I'm aware there's a new statute. Have you done training on elder abuse and financial exploitation? What you are going to see here real soon is we're working with the Credit Union and Bank Association in developing some posters that are going to go into the bank lobbies that say, has somebody asked you to, pull out a bunch of gift cards? Is somebody on the phone right now trying to talk you through the transactions, whatever that? Those are scams, and you need to tell one of us. So you'll start seeing those pop up. We haven't designed, we haven't printed yet, but their agreement is they're going up in every bank and credit union in the state. We gotta get to a point where we stop the money from going out, because once it goes out, I can whack them, but it's like whack-a-mole. One pops up, I hit him in the head. The next one pops up, you hit him in the head. That's fun, but it doesn't get any money back. It's fun for me. Not so much for them. So. I would talk to either their customer relations group or a branch manager or assistant manager. They'll know because they would have been responsible for putting together the training. That's a really good question. I'd go in. In fact, I just talked to my bank yesterday. I talked to the president of the bank, and I said, hey, I'm seeing a lot of this stuff. Are you seeing much of this? And it's a small bank, and they're like every week. She goes, we get at least one a week. Some weeks we'll go 2 weeks, and then I get 5. She's like, they're hitting our group all the time. Well, if they're doing it, bigger the bank, bigger the target. Okay?
I want to report that somebody stole the money out of my savings account. I think it was me. Scott, thank you so much. I hope
My
you all
pleasure.
enjoyed this. If you could just give us 1 second, we've got cheese and ham, cheese and pepperoni pizza. You'll get a breadstick. We're gonna have everything ready. Just give us 2 seconds. If you want to chat with Scott for a minute, and then we're gonna start dismissing you out this door. So give us just 1 minute.
Yes.
She said, yeah.